Hello, hello, welcome to cEDH Budget. I'm Tim, and tonight, continuing our series of beginner cEDH Meta Busters, we're going to discuss Chulane, Teller of Tales. I know, it's pronounced Holland, but I'm a hick, so I'm going to say Chulane. But before we get started, please check out our Discord and our Patreon. Links are in the description below. And if you like our content, please hit that like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out a lot. How you doing tonight, lovely co-host Brandon?
I'm doing great, Tim. I'm excited to talk about Chulane. I love this commander.
All right, well then let's get busting a move. All right. So for those of you who don't know, Holland is a 2/4 with Vigilance for 1 white, 1 green, 2 colorless, and a blue. That has a triggered ability of whenever you cast a creature spell, that you get to draw a card, and then you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield, untapped on top of it. Then it also has a activated ability of 3, tap, and return target creature you control to its owner's hand. So the main block of text that we care about with this deck is the middle one of the whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, and then put a land into play from your hand. All right? It's actually pretty integral to how the deck functions. So being in Bant, we obviously get access to counter magic and things like Oko, as well as we can leverage quite a bit of things like Ranger Captain of Eos, even Mind Sensor. Those kind of help us interact on the board. We can also play Gilded Drake if somebody tries to steal our shit, so we can get it back. But the crux of it is we do have all the standard blue stack interaction, all the forces and the fears and the offer and the veto and stuff like that. But it's down here in the enchantments. So we get to play Deafening Silence because our deck is a creature-based combo deck. So that's really nice. Also, we can leverage Earthcraft pretty effectively, which plays under pretty much all stacks and allows us mana generation. Also kind of doubles as a combo piece. Then we get cards like Overburden, which is whenever a player puts a creature card into play, that player returns a land to its owner's hand. Return a land he or she controls to its owner's hand. So there's a couple of copies of that effect. The other one is Mana Breach, is whenever a player plays a spell, it's cast a spell, they return a land to their hand. And the idea is that whenever you cast one of your creatures, you bounce a land to your hand, resolve your Holland trigger, draw your card, play the land back. Okay? So you're thinking, well, alright, there's only like 20-something creatures on the deck. I'm going to run out of stuff eventually, right? Well, guess what? You won't. So once you get Mana Breach or Overburden out, you can have a couple of creatures. One of them is White Mane Lion, which is a 1 white, 1 colorless, has flash. It's a 2/2. Whenever it comes into play, return a creature you own to its owner's hand. So you just play it, bounce it, play it, bounce it. Now, in the instance of White Mane Lion, you're not netting mana off of it, even if you have like the Earthcraft in play, because it costs 2. So you get to put 1 land into play and then you have to tap the lion or whatever. But the other one is Shrieking Drake, which is a 1-card combo in that instance. And Shrieking Drake is 1 blue. It's a 1/1 with flyer. Whenever it comes into play, just return a creature you own to its owner's hand. What's nice is with Holland, especially if you have like the Overburden out, Mana Breach, you can just draw your deck and then do shenanigans from there. Some of the things that you can do is you play like a Lotus Cobra, and then now every time that land comes into play, you start netting mana off of it. So you'll make enough mana equal to the size of your deck. You play all your creatures out, cast a big finale, kill everybody. That is one way. Also, Tireless Provisioner is whenever a land enters the battlefield, you make a treasure or a food. So that's another one that when it's in play and you play the Drake with the Overburden, you start netting mana off of it instead of just being neutral. The other thing is that you can play things like Gaia's Cradle. So Gaia's Cradle will just make a ton of mana. Like a lot. Like if you have 3 creatures in play, it's doing the same thing that a Mana Vault's doing. You pay 1, you make 3. Alright. So one of the biggest combos with the deck is to leverage a Lauren to cast like the lion and to cast the Drake over and over and over again. And then since you're not paying mana for it at that point, the Hull and Trigger kind of starts netting you mana, the Lotus Cobra starts netting you mana, and then you kind of start snowballing. Actually, like, in my opinion, Holland is probably the most viable Bant deck out there. There's a few others, but this is really, like, the one that, like, I see, like, having the best chance. Another thing is that you can do, there's a bunch of little combos that they list with, like, Classo Curio. And it's just kind of more of the same stuff. You just kind of play the Drake, play the Lion over and over again. You get the Breach or the whatever to kind of just start making things work. And then from there, you eventually just draw enough of your deck that you can finale everybody to death. You can also, like, tutor out pieces with Wargate as well. I know that some builds will run an Eternal Witness and then do Eternal Witness loops. But for the most part, like, really the finale just kind of gets you there. And there's not, like, the deck's not fancy. It might be a deck that doesn't run Oracle, but I mean, at the end of the day, you really kind of need the Breach and the Overburden and, like, the Aloran, like, to kind of make all of it work. And even as you're progressing, you're eventually just going to get to those points. And your hard out is almost always going to be finale. Because there's not really any other... Like, sure, I could Destiny Spinner all my lands. Like, that's a thing, especially once I make a bajillion mana to add to my creature count. But we're basically just winning with combat damage. Mm-hmm. For the most part. It's got kind of a medium skill cap. Because you're in blue, you just kind of have to know where to interact, but you're kind of limited on your interaction. Holland is probably one of the better card advantage engines in Bant, and also doubles as like a combo piece, which is kind of nice. And then you're just playing some of the best hate bears that you can play under. In this list, I'm not super hyped personally about Lavinia. I know that there are people who are super hyped about Lavinia. I am not. I am not a big fan. Every time I've played in a deck, I have been nothing but disappointed. The main reason is when Lavinia is in play, it de-incentivizes your opponents to use interaction on each other. Because one, half the time they can't cast it. Especially like if they're like on rocks as opposed in like a low land count, like the storm decks. And two, if they're like it shuts off a lot of their free magic. So if you're playing in a meta where like they're running Fierce,
like Turbo
Force,
Nas or something.
Yeah, like I mean, even a non-Turbo Nas meta decks designed to even like combat that run a lot of the same free interaction. Lavinia shuts all that off, and then once you start coupling it with like the rule of law, you really just kind of like at that point the burden gets shifted onto you to stop everybody. And the deck's like, while it can help, and it is running like 10 counterspells, maybe 11, that's still not like counterspell.deck. It's not Brawl. And even then, like, these don't draw you cards, your creatures do. So, you know, just keep that in mind. I think that they're probably, for me, like I would play something, like I would even just play a Manglehorn over that, personally. But that's just me. But other than that, I think the list is very tight. I think that Joking and Just Ice and Kuma have done a great job with the list. And just to kind of go over the primer a little bit, once you kind of go over the primer a little bit and you kind of really get the basics. I don't think the curve with the deck is super steep. I think where it starts getting steep is learning how to not burn out all your interaction because you're in Bant. Because sometimes your card draw can be a little clunky. But outside of that, I think the deck's pretty straightforward. I think it's got a decent curve, and then as you kind of get better at the deck, I think your play skill will reward you, but it's pretty smooth transition from like adequate play to optimal play. Like that graph. And then also the deck can budget pretty well. Most of the combo pieces aren't super expensive. Or you can kind of like some of them you really can't go without the Aloran. But again, like $65 for a Magic card is, while expensive, is not out of reach for a core combo card. Like sure, maybe like Earthcraft might be a little much. You might have to like play around a little bit and try something else. Overburn's not bad. Mana Breach is only $2. The Lion and the Drake are cheap. While Cradle's nice, it's not essential. I mean, it is essential, like if you're playing in like that tier of a budget meta, or that tier of a meta where everybody's playing fully optimized. But if you're playing in like a mixed meta or a slightly like a non-proxy meta, like you can make some sacrifices and the deck will still perform reasonably well. Mm-hmm. May not be perfect, but I think that like probably the biggest ticket that you're kind of stuck with is the Aloran and the Cloudstone are probably the two biggest like must-haves that are over 50. You can kind of you can transition some of the interaction suite around, cut some of the counter spells for ones that are slim interaction but still not like super expensive.
I honestly disagree with you on that.
What?
Because of the needing the Aloran and Cloudstone, because I've seen decks that have neither and still can hit above their weight class. It's just that the combo is so unique, I guess you could say, and like not everyone's prepared for it, that you can kind of get under people super quickly with the deck, which most people don't expect. And on top of that, like even going mana neutral, you could still draw your deck and have enough mana to cast like a Thassa's Oracle or something and win on the spot. I've seen it happen way too many times than I'd like to admit.
Okay. So here's what I'm saying with like those cards being kind of necessary is, I mean, if you're approaching it from where I generally kind of set that mark for like a beginner cEDH deck is around the $500 mark, right? Yeah. Once you start playing against decks that are kind of in that tier and above, you really start needing those types of cards because you're not going to be able to go off fast enough and consistently enough without that density. Now, I know you tend to play more in an ultra budget meta. And yes, definitely, like if we're rocking $100, $200 decks, you can get, and that's against, and those decks are roughly at parity with each other. And when I say rough, I don't mean like exact. I just mean like if I'm playing a $200 deck against like a $400 or $500 deck, this can probably punch higher if built correctly. You are correct. But if I'm playing a $200 deck against a $1,000 version of it, or against $1,000 decks, then it kind of, you just get priced out at some point. You know what I'm saying? But the thing that's nice though is, like you said, it can punch above its weight class, so to speak, and it can do it relatively cheaply without those pieces in that instance. You're right. You are. It's just a matter of the context. One card I do think you have to have, and I guess you could find another outlet, but really Finale is like a key win con for this deck. Yep. And it's $42. Like there's other win cons you can get. Like you could draw your deck and play Oracle, I guess. But I mean, even then, that's still $10. You could pick another overrun, like another overrun effect, but you still need infinite mana to do that. Like this only needs 12. Not that 12's
the way a couple of my friends set theirs up is instead of running Thassa's Oracle, they aim for like a slightly slower version and instead play thank you, Lab Maniac.
Because of the Holland trigger.
Yeah, because it's easier to or it's harder to get around whenever you can just at instant speed play something like White Main Lion and win on the stack.
If you're playing Lab Maniac, do be wary that the Holland trigger is on cast, not on ETB. So if you've drawn your deck, or somebody has a way to do a force draw, like when you're low on cards and you've got that Lab Man on the stack, just kind of be aware of that. Yeah. Well, just be aware of it. Like, make sure you're sequencing in a manner that you don't get got. But you could also technically run Lab Man Jace, and even though it doesn't trigger the Holland, it does trigger itself. So
yeah, that is just also +1 and draw.
Yeah, mill 2 and draw. Always target yourself with the goddamn Jace. Don't target your opponents. They got a veil, you're fucked. Not if
you're running black.
Or green. Green. Because if they have veil, haha, sadness. So, but anyway, I think that maybe, like, unless you got something else, that kind of wraps it up, I think.
Yeah, that's for the most part exactly what I have to say.
So I will drop a link to the list in the description. Please check out the primer. And thanks again for joining us. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.